I now have the best card on the market.
3 weeks later.
Okay. In reality, I actually bought that card at launch, so it didn't really play out that way for me. But trust me, I met plenty of people who have experienced that very same situation at around the same time and experienced buyer's remorse as a result. Let me just tell you, I feel for you guys. Really, I do. What's going on, everyone? John Lazaz, Hobbyist PCs here. We're gonna be talking about something that a lot of you guys have probably thought about once or twice in your PC building career. Today, we're gonna be talking about future-proofing. And before I get going with this video, just letting you know there's a lot of construction going on outside, and I can't do anything about any noise that you might be hearing in the background. So apologies ahead of time. I've got videos to shoot. So what exactly is future-proofing? Future-proofing when it comes to PCs is the act of buying the best possible hardware at the time to prevent yourself from having to upgrade sooner than later. Usually the typical mindset with future-proofing is between 3 to 5 years. That's reasonable. For those expecting to have a PC capable of running for 10 years at the best possible settings, you might want to throw those ideas right out the window. Trust me, when it comes to future-proofing, I totally understand the mindset. Investing into good hardware in a PC is a pretty expensive proposition, especially if you're doing it for the first time or if you're just getting into the PC space. It can be extremely intimidating to spend that much money on something that you might only be using for certain specific things. Especially if you're a gamer and your next best option is a console. I understand that value proposition completely. But I'm not here to talk you into buying a PC over buying a console. I do have my own personal opinions on what I think of future-proofing in general, but I'm going to save that for the end of the video and just talk about some of the positives and negatives of future-proofing your PC. Let's start with some of the positives of future-proofing. First, and probably the most obvious out of them, you have less of a need to upgrade for a long time. I am, of course, going to get into whether or not you need to upgrade versus when you want to upgrade, but when you buy hardware that is probably more powerful than you really need it to be at the time, you're going to ensure that you're going to have a consistent experience at least for a while. Of course, this largely depends on your performance expectations, but this is usually the case for most. As far as another positive when it comes to future-proofing, there is less worry when it comes to the performance of your PC. Some of us who are buying mid-range or low-end builds usually have to worry whether or not, for example, if you're a gamer, whether or not our PC is going to be able to run the game at the same performance that we were used to with other games in the past. And for those PC gamers that invest a little more from the get-go, at the very least, those people have the expectation, or at least don't have to worry about their performance on their PC being subpar or below expectation for at least the next 3 to 5 years. And one other positive that I want to mention about future-proofing is that it could potentially end up saving you some money. This is, of course, something that you have to consider about on the long term, but depending on what the sales at the time are looking like, or depending on what sort of value you're getting out of that particular part, you might end up getting more value for your money than you expected. It can end up being a lot cheaper than simply upgrading at a constant 1 to 2 year cycle. So depending on your performance expectations, buying hardware beyond necessity might ensure higher performance for much longer. And not having to upgrade as frequently might help you save some money in the long term. Now, there certainly are some other positives to future-proofing, of course, that I didn't mention. So why don't you guys go ahead down in the comments and let me know what some of the other positives to future-proofing are that maybe I might have overlooked or didn't bring up in this video. I'm just trying to keep the video fairly short. Let's get on to some of the downsides of future-proofing. One of the big downsides of future-proofing, if that's your mindset, is that the pace of innovation is unpredictable. Of course, some of us here that are more in the know kind of have a better idea of what to expect moving forward. But for the average consumer, most of you aren't really going to know what is to come within the next year or so. As the intro video perfectly demonstrated, the NVIDIA RTX cards are a perfect example of this. Around that time when those cards were about to come out, rumors were circulating about ray tracing being in development and possibly coming soon, but most of us didn't really expect ray tracing to appear as soon as it did. It's not like ray tracing was necessarily a new technology in general, but for real-time rendering on the graphics card, it is brand new technology. And for someone who is buying a card expecting to get the best possible experience when it comes to graphical fidelity on their PC, for those who went out and bought a 1080 Ti too soon before waiting for this card to come out and be announced, they might have ended up being let down over the fact that they didn't wait. This could end up costing them more money, especially if it's too late for them to return the product that they just purchased. And that kind of also brings me to another downside of future-proofing. The best parts only really remain the best parts for a fairly short amount of time. And depending on what you buy, it might only be the best for about a few months to half a year at most. New hardware tends to release quarterly or biannually, and that's usually in the CPU department. When it comes to GPUs, it's a little more, you have a much longer window. It's usually about a year. Or in the case of the 10 series graphics cards from NVIDIA, of course, we had to wait 2 years or so. But when it comes to CPUs, they tend to have staggered releases a lot of the times, and they usually tend to release yearly. A lot of times they'll start out releasing a couple of chips at the get-go, usually their flagship, and then they'll start releasing their mid-tier models, and then they might start to go down to their lower budget CPUs. Then at some point they start releasing their enthusiast grade chips. You know, it's a repeated cycle. It's pretty predictable when it comes to CPUs. But if you're the type that buys hardware expecting to have the absolute best for a while, and you're expecting it to be the best for a long time, then you're future-proofing for the wrong reason. As a matter of fact, I would probably say that future-proofing shouldn't even be in your vocabulary at that point. And then, of course, the last negative that I want to bring up here is buyer's remorse. Of course, RTX is another really good example of this. This happened with a lot of people that I saw buying those 1080 Ti's a little too soon, and then finding out they could have maybe gotten a 2080, and then having the same performance along with ray tracing as an option. But this also kind of extends a little further than just a product releasing and then you not having the best possible product. You could end up buying a graphics card or a CPU or a particular component that cost a certain price at the time, but then maybe 2 months down the road, that price ended up being much cheaper and you could have saved more money. In a way, this kind of ties in with innovation and the pace that technology improves as generations go by. A lot of the times when a newer generation component comes out, the older generations drop in price. But if you ended up buying a particular component and the next generation of parts ended up being a better value than what you had purchased, you're going to end up regretting that purchase that you made at the time. Of course, I'm not saying that the RTX is a good value. I'm just saying here that if you saw a better value at the next generation, then you would probably end up regretting it. So who do I think are the types that should future-proof? I put this in quotations because what I'm basically insinuating is who should be spending as much money as possible. The first one's pretty obvious. The type that has a lot of disposable income should probably consider future-proofing as an option. Obviously, if money is no object, go ahead and just buy the rig of your dreams. Most truly future-proof PCs cost anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500, but that's only if you focus on essential hardware. Obviously, you might end up spending some more on things like RGB fans or things like AIO water cooling. That may or may not be essential depending on what you're trying to do with the rig. If you're trying to buy this big extravagant case that you want to look nice, it's obviously going to cost you some more money. But hey, it's not like you're buying a brand new car here. Another person who should probably consider future-proofing is the type that maybe might not have the money later down the road to actually upgrade. A lot of these people tend to be family types or people who are on tight budgets and maybe are using a long-term savings to go towards a PC, or maybe they're just a casual gamer that wants to have a nice experience on the PC. These are the people I'm kind of talking about here. Basically, if you're in a situation where it's difficult to justify spending anywhere between $150 to $1,000 to upgrade your current PC, then it might be best to just spend more now so that you don't have to worry about breaking the bank later down the road. At the very least, if you find yourself really enjoying PC gaming and you want to formulate some kind of a 3 to 5 year plan to upgrade your PC later, you have plenty of time to do so. As far as who else I think should be doing some future-proofing, I'd probably have to say that competitive businesses make the list here. If you are some sort of a business owner that relies on having the latest and greatest tech to stay ahead in their business plan, then realistically, you're just going to be buying the latest and greatest thing at a frequent basis anyway. This is almost me saying don't future-proof, but if you future-proof now, it might end up being a better investment for you later down the road, especially if that technology allows you to get ahead and your business gets more successful as time goes on. Instead of going cheap on certain components that are going to show their age fairly quickly, why not spend the extra now and collect on your taxes later? That way you don't have to worry about your business slowing down because of problems that you're experiencing or because of inefficiencies in the system. Now, to be honest, I think this is where my bias is going to start to show, but why don't we talk about who shouldn't be future-proofing? First of all, one of the type of users that I think shouldn't be doing any future-proofing whatsoever are budget users. If price to performance is one of your biggest concerns, then obviously future-proofing is fairly out of your reach. This might include people who are looking for a study or a work computer. Your needs aren't necessarily that high compared to more of a power user. So there's really no point in going out and trying to future-proof a PC. It's kind of pointless considering that your PC is probably going to last a while for what you need to do with it. And I do have to say that This sort of thing is mostly exemplified with the lower to mid-range components that you see coming out nowadays. A lot of the times, those components are bought by budget users, and they tend to show their age faster than some of the higher end components do. Not to mention that budget users are the type that like to shop around for deals. They might be the type that likes to buy things secondhand in the market, or they're the type that might accept hand-me-downs from friends or colleagues. Trying to future-proof one specific component could result in you losing out on your budget that could potentially help you upgrade other more necessary components in your system. In which case, I would say instead of spending that much money on one component, why not try to go out and use your ability to find better deals on products or getting things secondhand to try to reduce those costs so that you can actually afford a better upgrade down the road. Now, this one's pretty big to me. I would say that another person that shouldn't be even considered future-proofing is someone who's unsure about adopting the PC platform long-term. If you're sure or unsure that you won't be in it for the long haul, then don't invest heavily into your PC. This is especially true for those that are unsure at the time. Most likely by the time that you've decided that you want to stick around, you'd already be planning your next upgrade anyway. And if you're really enjoying your experience on the PC that much, you're going to find ways to make those upgrades happen. It's pretty much for that reason alone why, for anyone who's unsure about whether or not they want to stick with the PC platform, that they don't spend too much on it. Just get something that works for now and meets a certain achievable baseline. And then if you decide that you like the experience later on down the road, at least you set yourself up potentially to just make a couple of upgrades to vastly improve your performance later down the road. Speaking of upgrading, another person that I would say shouldn't even consider future-proofing is someone who is willing to upgrade to begin with. I would honestly say that value-focused consumers are the ones that benefit the most from this. And this is especially true if they're willing to sell or potentially trade their older parts for better parts. Kind of think about it for a second. If you buy something that's more value-oriented, that has the best price to performance that you can get, you can pocket that saved money and then hold on to it for a later upgrade. So that way you can actually achieve getting that dream performance that you're expecting from your PC later down the road. So for those particular users, I would say maybe having like a 3-year plan set in place when you buy your parts is probably the best approach that I would recommend. And lastly, probably the most obvious one, anyone that wants to have the best tech available at the time. Let's be real here. What's the point of future-proofing if you want the best piece of tech that you can have at all times? You're obviously willing to spend a large chunk of money on what you consider to be the best tech. You obviously care a lot about your status. And considering the pace of innovation, there's no way that you could possibly have the best tech for too long. More than likely, you're going to be upgrading on a 3 to 6 month basis. And yes, that requires a lot of extra income. The main, selling point of future-proofing is the idea of saving money in the long term. And there's just no way you're going to do that if you're trying to have the best tech at all times. So honestly, for those people, future-proofing shouldn't even be a thought at all. Alright, so here's the part where I'm likely to rustle some jimmies. Do I think future-proofing is worth it? For me personally, I personally don't think it's worth it. And this largely has to do with the type of PC gamer or PC user that I am. I usually know what I'm buying into. I'm very aware of the market and how often upgrades tend to come into the market itself. I'm very conscious of the pace of innovation, and I have plans to be a long-term PC user. So for myself, it doesn't really make sense for me to future-proof a rig. But after all things considered here, it largely depends on your personal situation, whether or not future-proofing is worth it. The reality is, even myself want to feel like we're getting the most for our money when it comes to the components that we buy. Everyone likes to find a good deal on something good. That's totally understandable. But again, if you're the type that's only really concerned about getting the best possible performance for your money, then honestly, future-proofing's kind of counterproductive for you. And it's especially counterproductive if you're in it for the long haul. For those of us out there that are very budget conscious and try to do our best to make sure that we get the best performance for our money, we're most likely going to be buying parts that will show the best possible performance that they have to offer for at least 2 to 3 years. And honestly, if you are in it for the long haul, that's plenty of time to save up for the next upgrade. And you might even be able to save some money by selling that old graphics card or that old CPU so that you can upgrade to your newer one for cheaper. Not only are you getting that upgrade in time, but you're also potentially helping out a budget user that just wants to get their foot in the door or just wants to stay gaming for a little longer. However, if you're the type that is willing to be in it for the long haul and has the money to spare to buy an extravagant setup, then future-proofing really isn't a bad consideration. And this is made especially clear if you have the money now, but you know you're not going to really have the money later down the road. Life happens, priorities change. It's totally understandable. So maybe you might be the type that should consider future-proofing when you're building your rig. And for those with all the money in the world, of course, the word future-proofing shouldn't really exist in your vocabulary. because at any point you can just get an upgrade whenever you feel like getting it. But my overall point when it comes to future-proofing in general and why I personally don't think it's worth it is that PCs, yes, they can be expensive, but they usually only get expensive up to a point. And anything past that point is usually optional, luxurious, for the sake of being expensive, or sometimes usually at the point of diminishing returns. And overall, that kind of just sums up my thoughts on future-proofing. Hopefully it helped you guys out. And that just about wraps up the video, guys. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please be sure to rate down below and leave some comments to let me know what you guys think about future-proofing. In the description down below, there'll be links to my various social media pages, as well as a link to the Hobbyist PCs community Discord, where you can join in on the PC tech discussion, or maybe get some tech help, maybe even if you want to plan your future-proofing build ahead of time. There's also a link to my Twitch page down below. I stream twice a week, and it's a great place to go and talk to me live and in person. Also down below, you find links to the merch page. I have coffee mugs and t-shirts available, and I will be expanding the shop pretty soon. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with everything going on at Hobbyist PCs, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications. You'll be notified anytime we update to the channel. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and have a pleasant day, everyone.